Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October Research Keys to Real Estate podcast. I'm your host, Mary Schuster. My guest today is Joe Powell, who is Vice President and Managing Underwriting Counsel for Fidelity National Title Group in the National Commercial Services Southeast Operations. Now, many of you will already know Joe and his work, but we wanted to talk with him today to zero in on what's going on in the commercial real estate space currently. The commercial market and the residential market often work opposite each other, but that's not entirely the case right now. So whether you currently do commercial business or not, it's always a good idea to keep your finger on the pulse of it. Joe is one of the best experts in this field, so please enjoy our trip through the commercial landscape with this talented and committed, experienced attorney as our guide. The presenting sponsor of the Keys to Real Estate podcast is RamQuest. RamQuest fosters a customer-first culture built around an unwavering commitment to provide solutions that don't just meet, but exceed expectations. RamQuest's newest title and settlement production solution, Horizon, delivers unparalleled efficiency, robust features, and scalability to ensure you have tools to boost productivity and elevate performance like never before. Horizon streamlines your operation with secure 24/7 access, automatic updates, and all the power that only the cloud can offer. Plus, Horizon offers a direct connection to the industry's most extensive network of service providers and partners. Experience Horizon for yourself when you visit ramquest.com. And now, please enjoy the show. Joe, welcome to Keys to Real Estate. We're so happy that you're here today. Now, hey, I follow you on Twitter, and I love your thoughts out there. Sorry, it's still Twitter to me. I love your thoughts out there, but I saw a special post from you today. So is today an anniversary for you?
Yeah. Today, we're recording on May the 1st, so I'm beginning my 27th year as a practicing lawyer. And, that just means I'm really old, but it's a real interesting, memorable day. There's a whole story that goes along with that. I almost didn't make it to my swearing in ceremony because I was going too fast and the engine actually blew up in my car,
On your
and my wife
graduation.
was with me, and it was just a mess. So we eventually got there, but it was a crazy start to a wonderful ride all these years, being a lawyer and title guy and everything else, so much of which I never would have expected,
That's amazing. Well, congratulations, and thanks for letting us be a part of your celebration.
Yeah, it's great. I love remembering things, and you got to learn from the past and in order to go to the future, and just always looking back at things and remembering where you came from and all the great experiences and opportunities that you have. It makes up who you are.
That's especially true in this business, I found.
It is. It really is. And just working with lots of great people over a lot of years and learning from them, trying to contribute in my way to others and just to the industry in general. And it's been extremely rewarding for me. So I hope I have as long in front of me as I have behind me. We'll see.
Well, we hope so too. And so for those that don't know, you are a well-known commercial title underwriting attorney. And I definitely want to get into some particulars with that. But first, since you kind of have a bird's eye view of the commercial real estate market during this, let's call it interesting time, what sorts of things are you noticing in the commercial space, especially post-pandemic?
Well, the thing about it, when the pandemic first started over 4 years ago now, I remember it very well getting an email on March the 11th or so that said, don't come back to the office until we tell you to. And then within a month or so of that, our entire industry was just kind of in shock and not knowing what was going to happen if any of us had jobs and if we were going to ever insure another piece of real estate. But then within another month or so, we couldn't fill orders fast enough and couldn't hire people fast enough. And so it's just like so many things we've all experienced if we've been in the industry for a few years, is that things come in cycles. But in the commercial side, one thing I've come to appreciate is that there are so many different asset classes. And so if one of them happens to be struggling, for instance, office maybe right now, then you have another one that might excel for no reason that's related to that, but just there's lots of different ways to fill that bucket. And so the way that I relate to that is when I was first starting out as a young lawyer and then kind of stumbled into the title industry, if for some reason the law practice wasn't on fire one month, maybe the title side would be doing well. So there was always a balance. And so now I see that in the commercial real estate industry. Whereas we may not be insuring brand new office buildings, sometimes we're insuring debt restructuring on office buildings. So there's still title insurance to be had, but we also are doing lots of other interesting things like renewable energy, whether that's solar farms or wind farms, things that are very environmentally friendly and that people are interested in doing and where there's a big need. And then at the same time, when the pandemic started, students all went home and did remote learning, but now student housing is one of the biggest things out there as far as continuous building of student housing and refinancing and selling student housing. There's always an apartment complex on my list of things to underwrite, it seems like. And they're very expensive. And so we're very thankful for those type opportunities that we get to work with great developers all over the country, really. But that's just, kind of a couple of examples. There's other things talking about energy, battery plants for automobile manufacturers. We've seen those, of course, data centers. It's another thing that you might not think about or see, but they're out there. And they all have big ticket, they're big numbers when they go to insure those. Not just the land cost, but then just the technology that goes in them, things that happen. So we see lots of different things, and it's very interesting and exciting, just as it was when I was in private practice, kind of sitting around the table learning about the local economy and who was investing where, and being able to have knowledge of that. I now see that kind of from the sure enough the blimp, the kind of a more national picture and seeing where things are getting built and where investments are being made, and just have
I would
a
imagine
small opportunity, to be a part of it.
Yeah, I would imagine too that the infrastructure bill that passed might have had some commercial title deals going along with it. I know we're moving ground on some of those at this point, but I would imagine there's some more of those to come through in the pipeline with regard to land acquisition. Is there or no? Or finance?
I think, when the government kind of tries to pass laws that are pinpointed, I think they do have an effect, but probably more so the biggest effect that the commercial real estate industry ever sees is with the simple rate of interest on borrowing money. And whenever that changes, that's when the market really moves one way or another. And so if you have treasury bills that are paying a higher rate of interest, people don't invest in other things that pay lower rates of interest, like commercial real estate. So it can have a terrible effect, I guess, on how that works. But then at the same time, not all commercial developers borrow from people like you and I might borrow from. And so
Right.
there are lots of other resources out there, from sovereign wealth to large insurance funds or retirement funds that can loan money, and they can sometimes have different ways of scheduling interest rates.
Yes, that's very true. And well, mentioning obviously the interest rates, that's one of the stressors currently in the commercial market. What are some of the others, and beyond interest rates, or maybe even include that in your discussion? What do you think it's going to take to alleviate some of those current stressors in the market?
Well, just it's so many things that work together. How one, it's sort of like the economy is just like a bread, that butterfly that causes the tsunami across the world. And
Right.
so the economy works just like that. When people start spending or are able to spend more or start doing things more, anytime the interest rate changes, going down, for instance, it has a dramatic effect where developers build more houses because they know they can sell them, because people can afford them, because the interest rate's lower. And then that puts more money in people's pockets who are doing that. and then they spend that on things. Of course, gas prices, I guess we've gotten used to them being so high for so long, but I can still remember when the Ukraine and Russia conflict started was really one of the big reasons that the gas prices rose. And so if that can ever be resolved, hopefully, that might have some effect on gas prices. And those kind of things, delivering goods, it has a huge impact on the supply chain and getting things to people, getting food to people, because food costs are very high, which is why, restaurants, fail more than other things. But anyway, I'm not an economist. Let's
Right.
make sure we all realize that. But that's just kind of what I see
Mhm.
from where I sit in the cheap seats, and I think anybody could figure those things out. But when money is more available to the right people who know how to invest it and put it into things that produce more, that's when we see the economy improve.
Yeah, you bet. Well, so the current reality with a lot of the things in play that you just described, how does that impact underwriting decisions, if at all? Are you doing anything differently in this climate?
Absolutely. One of the biggest risks that probably anybody that's ever been involved in title insurance would probably say is if you have some sort of construction lien possibility, mechanics liens. In so many states, those can occur off record, which, title insurance is to insure what's on the record. But then the covered risks say there are no mechanic liens. So we have to figure out a way to make sure that that's true. And so that requires all of us in the title industry to dig and try to underwrite that and make sure that there is no activity. But sometimes we know that there is construction activity, so there's a potential for risk. How that relates to the economy is that construction lien underwriting gets much tighter, much more conservative when the economy is a little more shaky or when the economy is kind of trending downward, because builders and other people who would typically be paying contractors and subcontractors might get more of a tight budget and miss a payment, that sort of thing. And so it causes title insurers to look for the most liquid and the most sustainably solvent builders and developers, the borrowers who would be involved in those things. And so it makes getting coverage for people who are building and people who are developing, it makes it a little bit more difficult unless you just kind of have all the money in the world and there's not a big risk there. Because title insurers, when we had the great financial crisis of, I guess, 10 or 15 years ago, everybody remembers that. And the title insurance industry paid out, I know our company paid out more than $1 billion in mechanics liens over a couple of years, and nobody wants to do that again. And
Right.
so the way you solve that is have stricter, more conservative underwriting and just uh, put some parameters in place to make sure that you're reviewing those financials and that you've got people who are worthy of the risk, because it's not a risk for the lender. That's one of the things you hear sometimes as an underwriter is, well, the bank has decided to loan me this money, so why are you being so unwilling to give me this coverage? Well, the short answer is the lender has so much less risk if they're relying on the title insurer to cover the mechanics liens. And so there's not as much risk there, but we all work together to get it done. It's in none of our interest to say no, because when you say no, you don't sell the policy, you don't earn the premium, and we don't make our payday. But we can't just give away coverage either. Sometimes I try to explain to people it's not like the old fashioned airline insurance when you used to go to the airport, maybe in the 70s, and you just put in a quarter and turn the knob and you get a
That's
policy.
right. I forgot that. That's
No
right. That
underwriting.
happened.
It's not quite like that in title insurance, and especially the more risk that's out there. But um, I've learned that there's risk in everything. You just have to be able to manage it, have to be able to assess it, and know whether or not we want to accept it. that's what underwriting's all about.
Yes, well, kind of tying some of those themes together. And in some of our publications, we've been speaking with some builder developers who have kind of undertaken some initiatives to try to convert some of those prior office buildings over into multifamily residential. And there's a lot of at least conversational desire for that. A lot, several of them that we've talked to have said, yeah, but it's hard to make a profit doing that. And so I'm wondering, kind of from your perspective on the underwriting side, kind of what you feel about it, what your experience has been, and what you think the future of the concept will or won't be.
I don't know that I have seen any requests to underwrite a conversion from an office asset into a residential asset like a condominium or apartment buildings.
Mhm.
And probably for the very reason you mentioned, they are outfitted in a certain way to be office buildings. And that's the kind of the insides of the building, the plumbing, the electrical, and so forth. And so if you have to go in and completely rip all that out, you have to at some point figure out, are we saving money, or are we able to make a profit on this? Does this really pencil? And if it doesn't, then as much as it would be, in theory, great to do that, it doesn't really work. And this is one of those examples where I think, the federal government, they did pass some legislation or policy that encouraged that. But is that enough to really allow somebody to have those tax credits that work? Does it really allow it to get to the bottom line as it should? And I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But if the experience is the answer, then there haven't been any that I've seen.
Yeah. Well, and also out on real estate Twitter, where we both hang out and you comment more than I do, but we're starting to see some real yellow and red flags with some of these office buildings and their loans.
Yeah.
And so, you made a good point earlier about kind of restructuring some of those deals, but
Hmm.
not all of those owners are going to want to continue to stay in the vacant office space business. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure what to expect on that front.
Well, I know the office owners, the landlords. I know that they are offering every incentive possible to keep tenants in their spaces, whether that's lowering rent, giving actual cash, doing additional improvements, putting in greater amenities, you name it. There's every possible incentive that can be awarded to a tenant, they will do it. Now, some tenants just, it doesn't matter. It still doesn't work, and so they can't stay. But for the ones that can, I think the landlords are doing everything they possibly can. But at the same time, the lender for that landlord does not want to be the landlord. They don't want to take the building back, and so they're going to do everything that they can possibly do to restructure and modify whatever it needs to happen within reason, that things can still work and people still, make paydays. That's what we're all in business for. As long as that can happen, they're going to do it because, as we've said, the economy always comes back around. It's just a point of when. Is it politically related? Is it world issue related? Who knows? But there are cycles, and so it's just a point of how long can you wait, and do you have the do you have the strength to be able to wait? Because the ones that can, they always do very well when it comes back.
Well, and I love that you mentioned that because, we have so many agents right now that are finding they're in the kind of the famine period of the feast and famine cycle that accompanies this business. And on this anniversary of your becoming a lawyer, you've been through a few of these cycles, and I'll have a lot of sympathy and empathy for newer players in the market who it seems like right now they're having a once in a generation financial event happen about once a decade.
Mm.
So all that to ask you, what advice do you have regarding the cyclical nature of this industry, and especially enduring through the times that we are experiencing right now?
Well, I can speak from experience because I had both famine and feast when I was a private practice attorney and founded my own title agency and did that for close to a decade. I mean, we got in at just the right time when the economy was booming, just after kind of the 9/11, and the government was pushing money into everything and trying to get people back on their feet and just, get the mood right. And so that, as it can and does, that propped up the economy. It funneled down to real estate, and we were the beneficiary of that as real estate practitioners for many years. It didn't go the opposite direction where I live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, until probably the beginning of 2010. And so, but my advice of how do you get through that, if you have the good fortune of having kind of two buckets to draw from, both a title side and a law side, like I did, at least you've got something to fall back on, or if one doesn't work, the other one does, hopefully. But at the same time, you almost have to adopt some sort of biblical financial strategies where you put away in the storehouse for when the times aren't good. And there's such a natural tendency to, you know, when you make more, to change your lifestyle upwards. And if people cannot do that to a degree, there's that's a great strategy for how you get through, and just tighten your belt. And sometimes you, unfortunately, people can't always keep their jobs. That if you have an operation that has 20 people, that may be that you have to have only 15 people. Or if you have 5 people, maybe you only can have 4 people. Or you may have to pay rent at a different rate or move. But what do you do to survive? There's all kind of ways. And it kind of is an experience for me. I'll be glad to share where, when that happened, I actually made a call as a title agent. All title agents have a state office that they can call, for their underwriter. And some people write for multiple underwriters. I was never smart enough to do that. I was not able to get them to bid for my business. I didn't even know that existed. But anyways, I actually called the state office of Chicago Title that I wrote for and said, look, it's kind of finally, not going gangbusters like it was. I just wanted to see if y'all had any, national referrals, or if you'd heard of some things that maybe I could get in on, or maybe, serve on a panel, anything to get better exposure, or what, that kind of thing. So there's that. But that conversation actually is what began my hiring as state counsel initially, because there was going to be an opening in that job. And so it was really a great timing for me to just make that phone call. But you never know, and that's why people need to have a good network. And I still enjoy my social network through social media, LinkedIn or Twitter and other things. That's good in that realm. But then too, being involved in the industry through Alta and then the state associations, all of those are profitable. Whether you have some reason to engage those relationships now or 10 years from now, you need to have a network. And so I can't encourage that enough.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, kind of zeroing in a little bit more on commercial transactions themselves. What's I I was a closer a million years ago, and I obviously started out in residentials and love those, and they are what they are, and they're great. And when I got over to the commercial side, that was wow, that was a whole new world, and I loved that world,
Mm-hmm.
and I missed that world. But I would be interested in your perspective about what's different working with commercial customers versus residential customers.
I think the main differentiation probably would just be the word sophistication, because most residential customers, everybody probably moves 5 or 6 times on average during their life, sometimes many, many more, and sometimes far fewer. But, you know, it's not every day that they're involved in a real estate transaction. So, um, I've in my career, I've seen, you know, as far as residential customers, you come in and people just have that real deer in the headlights look. gosh, look at this mound of paper or all these things I have to sign. And do I really have to sign this neatly all this time? And why do I have to use this color ink? And just so many questions. And, can you explain this to me? And then 4 hours later, we're finished with the closing. Whereas in a commercial environment, it's usually people who just, that's their whole life, is investing in real estate transactions. And if they've done one, they've done 1,000, and they don't ask any questions because they know that they've hired great professionals, whether it's lawyers or bankers or real estate brokers, title people, you name it, and everybody has a role. And really, everyone trusts everyone, and it all gets taken care of pretty seamlessly, actually. There's no such thing as the old, New York style closing where everybody walks in and literally sits down and stays there until it's finished. Most all commercial closings now are completely done, electronically. Not the remote notary type thing that we've talked about so many years now, but just that everybody does it from where they are. And maybe a CEO in some corporate location somewhere that signs the document, and the general counsel of that company or real estate counsel says we're signed off, and then it begins a domino effect where everybody says that they're signed off and it's done. But the interesting part of whether it's commercial or residential is that the title folks are the central hub to all that happening. And that was just always the fascinating part to me, because there's not a ton of glamour, not a ton of riches and fame involved in title insurance, but you do have your thumb on the pulse of the entire transaction. And honestly, if you had to ask everyone involved, they would say, well, I'm relying on the title people to make sure that this gets done, it's recorded, it's funded, everything is correct. And so we have that satisfaction whether the fame and fortune comes or not.
That's right. I've always had an analogy of it's similar to air traffic control. I'm
Mm,
handling all the things, spinning all the plates, making sure everything's going on. And if I do my job right, you don't know I'm there.
yeah,
But if I mess my job up, you know right away
that's
where
right.
the problem is.
That's right. And it's there's two different ways of looking at underwriters in that regard. And when I say underwriter, I mean the person, not the company. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I'm an underwriting counsel on the commercial real estate side, and there's lots of underwriters all over the country. And some underwriters really prefer and have the personality to kind of stay in that back office and just bear down and underwrite and so forth, whereas I have always enjoyed sort of being more customer facing, enjoying the conversations, getting to know the insured, the customer, and the deal, and having those conversations, because I've just found that from a business perspective, you build those relationships and people tend to want to come back, or at least they feel comfortable with how you got there. But there's no right answer, but that's the way I've approached it. And I enjoy that, the way that we get to do it that way.
Yeah. Well, speaking of agents, um, I'm going to give you one free range underwriter question. You ready?
Yes.
What do you wish more agents understood about commercial deals and commercial underwriting?
Well, I guess there there is an expectation from the commercial customer that they are your only customer, which we all know that's not correct. But from the mindset of the title side of the business, you have to approach that commercial customer with that attitude, with that mindset that I'm going to treat this deal and this customer as if it is the only thing that I'm doing. And so if someone is doing their first deal or they've done a bunch of deals, I think they would say that that was the thing that allowed the deal to be successful, was by giving the commercial customer that feeling as if they're your best customer or your only customer, and that you're not going to rest until their deal is done. And just kind of a more valet type concierge service for that customer, just because usually um, the sophistication of the parties and the revenue you're going to generate, it really demands that. Let's be honest. And I had to learn this as a practicing attorney when I was early on. Do I want to take appointments to do cases paid by the state that I would make $40 an hour? Or do I want to take a real estate closing where I get a chance to earn a settlement fee and a portion of the title insurance premium and possibly get more and more and more, or just the hope? And so I had to kind of pull myself away from that appointment list because I would get appointments and say, come to the courthouse right now. And if I didn't do it, I would be penalized. But yet I had this really nice closing waiting on me. So, it just makes sense, economic sense. And so that's why I say you have to use your discretion as a title person to say, I love all my customers. We love everybody, but this one over here is really paying the bills. So I've got to make sure we take care of them, and the right personality in the right place can do all that. Like
Yeah.
you say, you keep the plate spinning.
Absolutely. Well, zooming back out a little bit to the industry in general, what do you wish more regulators understood about the title industry in general?
Well, I guess if they really kind of step down from the ivory tower just for a minute, they would all realize that if it wasn't for us, they would be in a world of hurt. But that's hard to explain sometimes. But really, that title insurance serves a very important purpose in the American economy, in transactions in general. Title insurance was created because there was a demand for it. Uh, this was not just some snake oil salesman that walked up and started convincing people to do something, and then somehow, the entire organized, established lending industry believed in it, and all major corporate customers as owners believed in it. It's a real thing. And so, we provide, just like Alta says, that peace of mind for transactions. And as I mentioned earlier, we're that hub that makes everything come together. And we pay a lot of claims when things go wrong, and things do go wrong. But the idea that our claims rate is low, it's really by design, because our whole job is to make sure that there are no claims. And so that the premium goes towards all the risk that we undertake to underwrite the removal of risk before anyone ever gets to the closing table. But you just have to think about it differently than what we used to call ordinary insurance, which is more risk and hazard based. Our job is to eliminate risk, not to accept it knowingly. Whereas, when you buy insurance for your car, well, every 6 months you're going to pay a premium because you might have wrecks or cause accidents every 6 months. That's not going to happen in title. It's everything backwards. But when all this kind of came up, I've had friends and colleagues around the country, just in my network, say, "Oh, I know somebody that works at the White House. I need to get you to speak to them and explain this to them." And I was like, "Well, of course, I would love to, but I haven't gotten that call for some reason."
Not yet.
it's
Somebody else beat you to it,
it's
Joe.
too politically fun to beat up on the title industry, I guess. But
Yeah. Well, you make such a great point is, every good product initially sets about to solve a problem.
mhm,
And in the case of title insurance, it seems we solved it so well without stating our value, by the way. That part's on us. I'll always say that. But
mhm,
we solved the problem so well that everybody seems to have forgotten what the original problem was.
mhm.
So let's kick this stool out and go back to that world, and guess what's going to happen? Somebody's going to come up with having title insurance again, would be my guess.
Right.
Let's just kind of skip that middle part, maybe. I don't know. I'll let you answer. I'm not answering that.
Yeah, well, it did go back. It started, with a case out of Pennsylvania, basically, Watson versus Muirhead, where, you know, as was the practice then, and in some places is still a practice sometimes now, that a lawyer will write an opinion to a bank or to a purchaser that says title is good, but for maybe a few canned exceptions that they'll put in there. And as the letter states, that is the opinion of that lawyer. And even now, in most places, if that letter is wrong or turns out to have some error, you really are kind of in a position of only recouping what you paid for the letter, or the time limit is very short when it comes to suing an attorney for malpractice or errors and omissions, that sort of thing. And so because of that, in Pennsylvania back in the 1870s, and a party not being able to really collect when a lawyer's opinion letter was incorrect, title insurance was born to be the backstop. And so it didn't eliminate the need for lawyers by any means. Lawyers still wrote the opinions, and that's where Lawyers Title Company came from years ago, that the lawyer wrote the opinion and the title company provided the insurance and underwrote it, and decided, well, this is the opinion, but are there ways that we can give more coverage, or should we give less coverage, even with the opinion saying what it says, even with the statute saying what they say? And so only an insurer can do that. And I don't think, of course, with all respect to the great people of Iowa, I just don't think that governments ought to be doing that. That's not really the role of government, at least my opinion.
Yes, that's a whole different conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
But that's
Okay.
kind of the short history
Yep.
of why we have title insurance,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
does serve a great purpose, from the smallest residential deal to the very largest commercial deal.
Yeah. Well, going from the history to fast forward to the topic of innovation, I've heard you speak and read some of your thoughts on innovation in title insurance in general and title insurance underwriting. So, what are some of the things you think are important for folks to consider in this area?
Well, and innovation is such a big word, and I can get in trouble really quick because I don't at all profess to understand hardly any of the technology, even that I use. But I just know it's there, and I can't explain it any more than I can explain Wi-Fi or air conditioning, but I know it's there. And so the people that do understand it are working very hard to, I believe, harness it and utilize it in a way. My general rule on any kind of innovation or new practices or technology that is suggested for the title insurance industry is bring it on. As long as it doesn't increase our level of risk, as long as it can maintain the level of risk we've already accepted, let's try it. See if it helps. Does it deliver the product to the customer better? Does it keep the premiums low? Are we, able to continue to be the profitable enterprises that we are? And if those answers are all correct, then it only makes sense to adopt those things. But I'm kind of old fashioned, and so when I talk about innovation, sometimes my idea of innovation is, think outside the box. And so that's what technology is. But since I'm not so proficient in it, when I think outside the box, I think outside of the box by, just talking to people, trying to understand the deals, not always just looking at a check the box underwriting list and say, well, if A, B, and C aren't here, we can't do the deal. Well, how many different ways can we try to get to A, B, and C? Let's think through this, because like I said, nobody gets paid when the answer is always no. We get deals done by figuring out creative ways, low risk ways to say yes, and make things happen. And that's what I enjoy really the most about what I do as an underwriting counsel, is trying to work with our team that works on deals all over the country to say, there's all these reasons why we should say no, but is there a reason we can say yes? And how do we get there and still feel comfortable about it, based on the premium we're getting, based on the relationship that we have with the customer, based on the rate of claims we've had on the same kind of deal in the past, and all these other intangibles. Because underwriting guidebooks can be written with all good intentions, but you still have to use your brain, and you have to use your experience. Because if all you do is read the guidebook and input the facts to it, you have become artificial intelligence yourself, and you can be replaced very easily at that point. But my experience has been that so many, especially commercial real estate deals, you just can't fit them neatly in a box. There's always this square peg trying to fit into a round hole, and we figure out a way to refine those edges and make it work. Lots of gray areas, lots of areas where we figure out a way to get deals done, and that's the fun part.
Well, and I love that you mentioned that innovation certainly includes tech, but goes beyond it too, because you're right. As the world gets more automated, and how I, as a consumer of anything, are expected to interact in a more automated way, that hands-on, eyes to eyes valet service that you mentioned before
Mhm.
is actually an innovative concept again.
I think it is, and I, I've used it sort of as a, I guess you say, marketing tool. Although, I've never considered myself a salesperson, but I think honestly, I try to say everybody in our industry is in sales, because no matter what you're doing in your role in that title shop, you're doing something that has an impact on whether the customer wants to come back or not, or whether the customer is pleased. And underwriting, I think it's great because I do it, but you're right in the thick of it. You're making the difference of where somebody gets a yes or a no, and how do you get there? Now, sometimes the answer clearly has to be no, because there's just some unreasonable request. But if it's not so extreme like that, there are a lot of different ways to approach it. And so, everybody that answers the phone, if there's a phone call, or everybody that writes an email, we've all run into keyboard warriors before. Tone can never be understood by email. And so we have to figure out ways to express ourselves that generate, that good relationship, that hospitality that we all want, right? When we call any customer service line, we want to walk away with a good experience. And there's really no reason why that can't happen in every title transaction. We're all just honest, decent working folks in America that want to take care of our families. And we got the good fortune and the pure luck of getting in the title insurance industry. And so, once you get in, you never leave, clearly. So we just got to make it another day in paradise.
That's right. Well, you are a magnificent ambassador for the industry. Your love for what we do really shines through when you talk about it, which is one of the reasons we really were excited to have you on season 1 of Keys to Real Estate. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for joining us today. We do appreciate you.
Oh, it's a great, great pleasure, Mary. I love all the title people that I've had a chance to interact with over the years. And like I say, every chance I get, the folks that I get to know and to meet in our professional world are great folks. And so anytime I can give back, I want to be able to do that.
If you'd like to follow Joe on X, formerly Twitter, you'll find him at Title Lawyer Joe, and his contact information is linked in today's show notes. Thank you for joining us today. We'll keep bringing the guests and topics that help you successfully hold the keys to real estate. Until next time, I'm Mary Schuster for October Research, where knowledge is the competitive advantage.